Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the LG Sunset 4G. This is a really low-cost phone. In fact, the reason why we're taking a look at it is because it was the cheapest smartphone that I could find on Amazon. So I was curious enough to pick one up. So you can tell that it was sold directly by Amazon in what seems like it's refurbished because it's a white box packaging for only $10 with free shipping if you're a Prime member. That's a pretty insane cost to pay for a fully working smartphone. In terms of specs, it's definitely low end, but as a new device, you're also looking at a 4.5-inch display. It has a 1.2 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon processor. I believe it's the Qualcomm 410, which really isn't that shabby for a low-cost device. It has a 1,900 milliamp hour capacity battery, 5-megapixel camera on board, and it runs on Android 5.0 Lollipop. So the phone does have integrated Wi-Fi, it has GPS, it is 4G capable, but it doesn't have things like NFC or wireless charging, of course, for this really budget-oriented model. We have the phone itself, we'll take a closer look at in a second. Here is the battery. There's also a wall charger included as well, simply using USB. There is also a micro USB cable for charging and syncing information. And we have the back cover itself, which is white in color. Very interesting that there seems to be kind of a contact, because that's where the buttons come into play, because back in 2016, 2017, LG still very commonly plays all of their keys in the very back here, which I actually still think is a pretty ergonomic placement. And on the back here, there is a SIM card that's pre-inserted. There's a loudspeaker along with a micro SD card for expanding the built-in memory, which since there's only 8 gigs, you'll probably need. I do want to point out though that these specs are pretty similar to even entry-level phones that are coming out today, especially ones that are running on Android Go edition based on Oreo 8.1, such as the Alcatel 1X or the Nokia 2, for instance. And those retail for $80, $90, which is 8 times more expensive than something like this, which is only $10, but has very similar internal specs. Only it's running on a full version of Android as opposed to Android Go, which is more optimized for low-end hardware. So let's try turning this on by first peeling off the screen protector and seeing if there's any power left in the battery. And it seems like there is indeed a little bit. We do have a bit of a chin on the very bottom here, also made out of the same ridged kind of plastic material. There's the LG logo. We have just the display 4.5 inches. It is an IPS panel though, which is already an improvement for really low-cost budget phones. It used to be that they didn't have IPS technology, so that viewing angles were horrible. So here's a quick size comparison with the LG G5, also with that chin design. So LG, does recycle their looks even on low-end phones, which means that it looks still pretty classy as far as the overall design is concerned. LG does throw in some of their other gestures as well, such as double tap to wake. So even on a really low-end phone, we do have some of those extras, which is pretty cool. And we can also create a knock code, so that's a way of unlocking the device by tapping on various corners of the display, creating a virtual pattern. LG then gives us the option of tweaking the touch button configuration, so we can even change the ordering of the back, multitasking, and home keys, as well as the coloring. And there we go, we're now graded into Android. We can double tap on the top of the display to turn it off as well. Kind of an interesting transition there, just to turn it on and off with this kind of line that runs across the display. And to turn it back on again, we have to enter this virtual knock code. We have a drag-down notification tray that's heavily customized by LG for all the icons. We do have access to a folder that has all of our Google apps inside, including Gmail, YouTube, Drive, and Maps. There's access to the Play Store, utilities, which are all by LG, such as their custom clock, calendar, and a memo pad. So again, a pretty heavy layer of customization, but the Snapdragon 410 is a pretty tried and tested chipset that seems to be doing actually a pretty decent job of keeping up with this relatively heavy skin. We also have a list of all of our applications, including McAfee as one of the bloatware. And otherwise, there's also Polaris Office built on in that allows us to view, edit, and Excel PowerPoint documents when on the go. We can also pinch out here just to tweak the home screen layout. This is what the multitasking tray looks like. Again, fairly responsive for only 1 gig of RAM. Now demo of video playback and the speaker quality. It's actually quite good. The speakers are very loud. They don't have too much bass, of course, but for something that's rear mounted, it actually sounds pretty decent. Now, the video playback was also a little better than expected, mostly because I found that the Wi-Fi reception in conjunction with the apps here do seem to be quite well optimized for the Snapdragon 410. It still seems, again, surprisingly responsive when it comes to overall navigation. You don't really see too much delays or slowdowns as you're trying to search things up and loading up the videos. There's almost no buffering at all. And maybe that has also something to do with the fact that the screen is lower resolution, so there's less pixels for the processor to push around. So this is using LG's custom interface, but you can tell that this particular gesture will automatically take an image, which can be useful if you're using it for selfies, for instance. Again, the software itself is actually pretty interesting because the way that it's able to kind of focus in on objects is very similar to something like on an LG G5 or G3. You can change things like the resolution, but there's not a huge amount of, let's say, scenes or filters that you can apply to the built-in camera app. But one thing that's kind of cool is you can still activate a flash using the selfie cam, so the entire screen turns white. Taking a look at some of these sample shots here, again, they don't have the most detail in the world because they're only 5 megapixels, but overall colors actually look quite accurate. And as long as you keep the shot pretty still and you have a reasonable amount of lighting, I would say that you can actually get some pretty good looking shots. So really not that bad. And the phone is capable of recording full HD videos as well, but there isn't any optical stabilization, of course. And now a quick web browsing test. We're loading up the New York Times using Wi-Fi right now. More or less, it's getting the full site loaded without too many issues. This is a very complex page with lots of small text, images, ads, as well as scrolling elements that make it challenging for lower-end hardware to run. But you can tell on here it's actually doing a respectable job. A little bit of choppiness here, but there's no checkerboarding as you're scrolling very quickly through this page. The biggest issue, I would say, is just the screen is really quite small, so you do need to pinch in quite a bit to read text comfortably. And there's two software tricks which I find really cool. When the phone screen is turned off, you can long hold on the up key to activate the QuickMemo pad. So it will instantly bring the display on for you to jot down notes without unlocking the entire system. And I can also long hold on the volume down key when the phone's display is off to launch into the camera for very quick snaps. Otherwise, call quality is excellent on this phone, mainly because the microphone is a lot cleaner than I expected. In fact, it's noise canceling, it picked up my voice almost perfectly. I also tried it with a few kind of voice notes and voice memos, and it sounded better than many phones, maybe twice the price of this, which is great. So callers had no problems when it comes to hearing me, and reception was consistently around 3 bars here in the Seattle region, so no issues there. Battery life is also excellent on this phone, again because of the smaller, lower resolution screen, coupled with the energy efficient Snapdragon 410. This thing can easily last you 2 days, sometimes as long as 3.5 days before you need to recharge it again. Otherwise, it will load and install basically any program you'll find in the Play Store. So yes, technically you can install Asphalt 8, you can also install PUBG Mobile on here. Just keep in mind that your memory will be almost full after installing one of those larger games. And also you have to wait a little longer for the games to completely render and open up. But afterwards it's playable on the lowest frame rate settings. So that's more or less it as far as our review of the LG Sunset. Surprisingly, it's a really usable phone, especially for, again, $10. It's actually quite impressive. The build quality is extremely durable feeling. Despite the plastic build, it feels very firm and solid. It actually is quite ergonomic in the hand because of the smaller size and slightly curved edges. Performance is also better than expected just because the Snapdragon 410 is really a chipset that has held up quite well just because of how well it ran on budget-ended phones, making the experience feel a lot faster and snappier than past devices on the market. So overall in 2018, I would say this is still, again, a pretty usable phone if you are on a tight budget, if you want a backup device, and you don't want to spend that much money. You can check out more details in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the LG Sunset, the $10 Android smartphone.